Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen wa salatu wa salamu ala Rasulil Kareem. Welcome again. I'm Imam Abdul Baqi. I'm on ITV and we're trying to give some sessions on Islam in America. Previously I have given you some back information and we have to continue along that lines to give guidance and inform people about the reality of that. I would like to read a little bit here. It says here, Dr. Edward Blyden in 1903 said, every race has a soul, and the soul of that race finds expression in its institutions, and to kill those institutions is to kill the soul. No people can profit or be helped under the institutions which are not the outcome of their own character. Therefore, we need our institutions, our masajids, masjids. And the reason I mention that because, you know, after 9/11, they tried to, you know, close what they call the masjid at Ground Zero, you know, which is Park 51. And I remember this quote from Edward Blyden, that we cannot find acceptance in that. We need our institutions. And those groups which are Islamic phobic, groups like Stop Islamization of America, the Anti-Defamation League, and the American Center for Law and Justice, founded by Reverend Pat Robertson and others, have forgotten the law of the land. The First Amendment to the Constitution of the United States says, Congress shall make no law representing the establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, abridging the freedom of speech or the press or the right of the people peacefully to assemble and to petition the government for regress of grievances. So what are these people trying to encourage? They're trying to encourage tyranny and fascism and intimidate the Muslims from wanting to be Muslim, to identify themselves as Muslims, when in reality, wherever Muslims went, they moved to give rise to growth and development and civilization. That brings us back to how Islam moved across North Africa, and we see all of these beautiful masjids, madrasas. Wherever Muslims went, they established madrasas. This is why, you know, Michael Hart mentions Umar ibn Khattab as even one of those most influential people. And he also mentioned Khalid bin Walid, you know, as one of those people. And the interesting story about Khalid bin Walid is that the Roman general came and he said, why are you so successful? Why you cannot be defeated? Is it that Muhammad ﷺ gave you a sword from heaven, and as long as you have this sword, you can never be defeated? He said, no, it's not about me having any kind of mystical sword or anything like that, because every sword that went against Khalid bin Walid, you know, perished. It's because of the fact that at the Battle of Mu'tah, when they fought against the Romans, Khalid bin Walid organized the Muslim ranks as they were retreating and throwing up dust, so that the Romans said to themselves, or the Byzantine said, oh, wow, they must get reinforcements. Let us retreat and leave. This is why Abdul Baqi sent to that. And this is also the ride the Muslims went into Europe eventually. And they went in Europe, as I said, in 711, and they were not driven out of Europe until the Battle of Tours, you know, where they were stopped at the Pyrenees River in France. So Portugal was under Muslim dominion. Spain was under Muslim dominion. The Muslims established numerous amounts of cultures, civilizations. We talk about science, botany, zoology, astronomy, alchemy. All of these sciences that we take for granted today, it was Muslims who took these sciences to Europe. Europe was the Dark Ages. They had a 90% illiteracy rate in Europe. And as I said before, they established 17 universities, and they afforded anybody who wants to come from the world to come there and to study and to engage in discourse. This is why one particular so-called political figure here, his name escaped me, but he said that the greatest thinker in Europe was Ibn Sina. Ibn Sina, you know, gave rise to philosophy. The Muslims codified the philosophy of the ancient Greeks and Romans, and Plato, Aristotle, all of these works, and put them into Arabic. They even also took works of so-called Christian scholars and Jewish scholars and began to put these things into implementation so that knowledge began to spread in Europe. And so after 750 years, this is the gratitude that they give to Islam. They drove the Muslims out in the Spanish Inquisition. In 1492, they drove them into North Africa. The Muslims were subsequently forced to vacate and to leave Islam, to apostate into a certain state. But some of them took towards what we call taqiyya. They took towards hiding their Islamic identity, you know, but they didn't make any overt manifestation about Islam until they begin to move outside the realm of the influence of the Europeans. And of course we know that the two kingdoms of Ferdinand and Isabella, you know, they came in and they drove the Muslims out. The Spanish Inquisition means that they tortured and killed people who were not apostate. You know, so it was through terror. You know, so when we talk about the word terrorism, it just don't mean to terrorize others. It also means to live in a state of terror. Those people who lived in Europe are Muslims. They lived in a state of terror. But they utilized some of the Muslims, you know, to bring them to the New World because Muslims had knowledge of the so-called New World. We know about the Paris map, which was given to the so-called Khalifa during the what we call the Ottoman Empire, in which it depicts perfectly all of the worlds and its continents, including the United States. So now we have the Muslims taking so-called Columbus to the New World and his so-called ships, the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria, and they mention it, you know. The navigators or the so-called guides were Muslims who were forced to convert to Catholicism, who had knowledge of the so-called Americas, and begin to tell them things about Islam. And so one of the documents I want to share with you, and you should have in your library, is the book They Came Before Columbus by Dr. Ivan Van Sertima, and Deeper Roots, Islamic Influence in the Caribbean and the Americas by Abdullah Hakim Quick. These books, inshallah, will give you clarity, and you can see with clear depiction how Muslims were here long before Columbus. And so even Columbus mentions this in his memoirs, And we should remember that Columbus himself, he died in prison. But they celebrate him because he is the Western expansion into the New World, or so-called colonized. And you cannot colonize a people, you know, who already exist. And whereas the Indians, Native Americans, they had, let's say, 10,000 years of history. They went from a population of 100 million down to a population of 10 million. And we should ask why. They were annihilated, exterminated, because the Europeans were expanding, seizing their lands, and subsequently they brought my ancestors to America as slaves. And so we're going to leave at this particular time on that note. And the next time we will talk briefly about Islamic influences in Europe, Islamic influence in the Americas, Islamic influence in Africa, and bring it to some conclusion and get into the subject matter of Islam in America. That is, that's not a newfound reality. We were here before, we are here today, and we will be here tomorrow, inshallah ta'ala, azza wa jal, and that our job and responsibility is to do what all of the Anbiyats did and all of the prophets did, is invite to the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So I ask you, inshallah ta'ala, to think seriously on some of the things I said and to take into consideration. This is something to think about.